The man I actually wanted to marry is him. Chloe leaned drunkenly against my old college professor, grinning as if this were the most natural thing in the world. Too bad he didn't want me, so I had to settle for you. Amidst the roar of laughter from the room, she winked at me. She was waiting for me to do what I always did, smooth things over and turn her humiliation of me into a joke. I didn't smile. I took off my engagement ring and tossed it into the nearest trash can in front of everyone. If you're into settling, you can keep that for yourself. The engagement party was being held at a historic hotel downtown. The lights were dimmed low, the crystal chandeliers dripping light like tears, casting a festive glow on everyone's faces. A large projection screen displayed mine and Chloe's names, the elegant script looking sharp enough to cut. I'm Mark Evans, an engineer by trade, currently working as a project lead for a major construction firm. Today was supposed to be one of the most dignified moments of my life. Chloe stood beside me. She was my fiancée, the star of the evening. She wore a white gown, her makeup flawless, her smile sweet. Everyone who knew her told me I was a lucky man. She certainly had a talent for creating that illusion. After a few rounds of drinks, the atmosphere had warmed up. Friends and relatives urged her to have another glass. She didn't refuse, holding her wine glass with eyes curved in delight. "It's fine, I can hold my liquor," she said, turning back to wink at me. I knew that gesture well. Every time she crossed a line in the past, she would use that look to make me play along, as if as long as I nodded, those inappropriate actions could be redefined as harmless fun. It was then that Simon Hayes was pulled onto the stage. He was my university professor, the man who had taught my core classes for 3 years. In his 40s, wearing a perfectly tailored suit, he spoke with a measured, unhurried cadence that always commanded respect among students. After graduation, I hadn't kept in touch with him much. We had only grabbed dinner a few times at Chloe's suggestion. She always said it was just a coincidence. Simon held his glass, the crowd jeering for him to say a few words for the happy couple. He waved them off with a smile, his tone humble, yet he didn't actually refuse. Suddenly, Chloe leaned in and linked her arm through his. It wasn't a polite, fleeting touch. She pressed herself against him naturally. Standing to the side, I saw it clearly. Her fingers tightened, gripping his cuff like a subconscious reflex. In that instant, something inside me quietly collapsed. "Actually," she began, giggling, her voice slurred soft by alcohol, "the person I've always wanted to marry is him." She tilted her head to look at Simon, her eyes filled with undisguised adoration. The air went still for a beat. Then came a laughter. As if on cue, the whole room erupted. People slapped the tables, hooting and hollering, saying she'd had too much to drink. Chloe turned her face and winked at me again. That look said, "You know the drill, play along." "Too bad he didn't want me," she shrugged, her tone breezy. "So, I had to settle for marrying you." The laughter grew louder. Some people looked at me, their expressions ambiguous, waiting for me to deliver a witty comeback like I had in the past, waiting for me to tidy up this mess into a joke. I stood there, suddenly unable to hear the surrounding noise clearly. My ears were ringing. I looked at her hand, still looped through Simon's arm. Simon didn't push her away. He just lowered his head and chuckled, tacitly accepting this as a harmless tease. It wasn't the first time. It was just the first time it had happened in a setting like this. I suddenly realized I had retreated too many times over the years, so many times that she could no longer distinguish the boundaries. Or perhaps she never intended to distinguish them at all. I raised my hand and slid the ring off my finger. I had chosen that band. Simple, no unnecessary frills. Chloe had complained it wasn't flashy enough, but she wore it anyway. I walked over to the trash can near the bar, and in front of everyone, I dropped the ring inside. It made a crisp clink as it hit the plastic liner. The laughter cut off instantly. I didn't look at anyone's expression. I just turned around, my voice flat. The engagement is off. Some people thought I was joking and started to chuckle, only to stop when they saw the complete lack of expression on my face. Chloe froze, finally letting go of Simon's arm. "What are you doing?" She lowered her voice, a hint of annoyance creeping in. "I said it was a joke, didn't I?" I looked at her. For the first time, I realized she genuinely thought I would just forgive her. "From now on," I said, "you can keep your jokes to yourself." Simon frowned, looking like he wanted to say something, but quickly reverted to his usual mild-mannered facade. I didn't say another word. My jacket was still draped over the back of my chair, but I didn't take it. As I walked out of the banquet hall, someone called my name from behind. Someone chased after me a few steps, then stopped. The moment the elevator doors slid shut, the light was cut off. In the confined space, it was just me. No anger, no hysteria. Just a sudden, ringing silence. That silence made one thing very clear to me. This relationship had died in that roar of laughter moments ago. I didn't go home. That night, I stayed at a hotel near my office and silenced my phone. When I came out of the shower, the streetlights outside were turning on one by one, the city acting as if nothing had happened. Early the next morning, I returned to my apartment. There was a pair of women's heels by the door, the ones Chloe wore often. She had a key to my place and had never returned it. I had just hung up my coat when the bedroom door opened. Chloe walked out, her makeup removed, hair messy, looking like she had been up all night. When she saw me, she first breathed a sigh of relief, then frowned. "Where did you go last night? You didn't answer your phone." Her tone held a note of dissatisfaction, as if blaming me for being immature. I changed my shoes, not responding. She followed me into the living room, sat on the sofa, and patted the spot next to her. "All right, stop making a scene." She sighed. "I drank too much yesterday." I spoke without thinking. "Is this really necessary?" I finally looked up at her. Her expression was natural, as if she were handling a minor glitch that had occurred countless times before. The apology came quickly, but it carried no weight. "You shouldn't have taken it seriously," she added. I walked to the coffee table, opened a drawer, and placed a stack of documents on the table. She looked down, startled. It was the itemized bill for the engagement party, along with the records of our shared expenses over the years. I had clearly marked which costs were mine and which were hers. "What is the meaning of this?" She furrowed her brow. "Didn't you say it was a joke?" My tone was even. "Then let's calculate exactly how much this joke cost me." She flipped through a few pages, her expression turning sour. "Why are you suddenly being so petty?" She looked up at me. "You weren't like this before." I didn't answer. I pulled out another document. It was the breakdown of all the arrangements I had made for the engagement, the hotel, the alcohol, the reserved gratuities, and the renovation plans for the house. The time, the amounts, everything was written in black and white. "You said you wanted dignity," I said. I provided it. Her hand paused in midair, the smile at the corner of her mouth slowly retracting. "Mark, aren't you going a little overboard?" She lowered her voice. "Just because of one sentence, you're going to blow everything up like this?" I looked at her. It wasn't just one sentence. It was her placing me in a position to be ridiculed in front of everyone we knew. The problem was, she never felt there was anything wrong with that. "Overboard or not, you know the truth," I said. She was silent for a moment, then suddenly let out a laugh. "So what?" She pushed the documents back to me. "You plan to settle accounts with me now? Who are you trying to impress with this clarity?" "Myself," I said. Her face went completely cold. "You've changed," she stared at me. "You wouldn't have pushed me like this before." I nodded. "Yes, I have changed." She stood up, her tone becoming shrill. "So what do you want? A breakup?" The engagement party already happened. How do you expect people to look at me? What she cared about was never me. I didn't answer her question. Instead, I began taking the things she had left at my place, item by item, and placing them by the door. Her makeup bag, her clothes, and that suitcase she always complained was too heavy to move. Watching all this, she finally started to panic. "Are you serious?" she asked. "Very serious," I said. Her voice dropped lower. "Mark Evans, don't forget, we've been together for so many years." I didn't deny it. Precisely because it had been so many years, I knew clearly that she had long grown accustomed to me cleaning up her mess. "Leave the key," I said. She froze. "You're kicking me out?" "This is my house," I said calmly. "You have no reason to keep coming and going." She stared at me for a few seconds, as if meeting me for the first time. Finally, she slammed the key onto the table. "Fine," she sneered. "Don't regret this." I didn't respond. The sound of the door closing wasn't loud, but it was decisive. The room fell silent again. I gathered the documents on the table, not sparing them another glance. She thought I would turn back, but she had never considered that this time. I really had no intention of playing along anymore. 3 days after Chloe moved out, I cleaned the house from top to bottom, not to forget anything, but because I realized many things simply shouldn't remain there. The closet was half empty. The bathroom was missing a bottle of her usual perfume, but the air felt fresher. It was also during this time that certain details I had deliberately ignored began to float to the surface. The first time she mentioned Simon was the year I graduated. There was excitement in her voice. She said he carried a lot of weight in academic circles, was gentle, and rare in his lack of pretension. Later, the mentions grew frequent. At the dinner table, she would casually drop a "Simon said," her tone as natural as if citing an ultimate authority. When we went shopping, she would suddenly stop and say that Simon would probably like the style of a particular shop. I hadn't responded at the time, assuming she was just making small talk. Looking back now, that wasn't sharing. It was a habitual gravitation toward him. I sat in the living room, piecing together these fragmented memories, and the picture became so clear it gave me chills. Her so-called just happened to be on the way moments almost always occurred when I was working overtime. The times she just happened to chat with him were always after dinners where I wasn't present. It wasn't a coincidence. It was just that I had always chosen not to verify. I didn't go to her for a confrontation, nor did I call Simon. People with engineering backgrounds generally dislike emotional judgments. Rather than argue, it's better to see things clearly. A week later, I returned to my alma mater for a project, needing to get a document signed by my former advisor. Simon Hayes' office was right next door. Standing in the hallway, through the half-open door, I saw him looking down, organizing files, his expression focused. Exactly as I remembered him. He saw me, paused for a moment, then flashed a smile. Mark Evans. He stood up. Long time no see. I nodded and walked in. The office was immaculate. The bookshelves were lined with academic texts and group photos. The people in the photos were mostly younger than him, standing straight, their eyes filled with reverence. This was the position he was comfortable in. I heard you're leading a municipal project recently. He poured me a glass of water, his tone easygoing. He was well informed. Yes. I took the cup. I'm here to handle some paperwork. He nodded, not asking further, as if unwilling to appear too inquisitive. This sense of boundaries was what he excelled at. We chatted briefly about work. His advice remained sound, his attitude impeccable. If not for the scene at the engagement party, I probably would have maintained my respect for him, just as before. Is Chloe doing well? He asked suddenly. His tone was casual, no probing, just the passing concern of an elder for a student. I looked up at him. Do you two communicate often? I asked back. He paused, then smiled quickly. She loves to exchange ideas, he said. Sometimes she asks me a few questions. What kind of questions? Career planning, broadening horizons, that sort of thing. You know how she is? She has quite a few ideas. He paused. You know how she is? She has quite a few ideas. He said it lightly, wiping the boundaries clean. I didn't press further. I simply realized why Chloe always felt understood. Simon was an expert at creating that illusion. He looked at me, his gaze mild, but it carried a hint of condescending scrutiny, as if checking to see if I had understood my place. I had seen that look many times in his classroom. When students faced him, they would subconsciously straighten their backs. I used to be one of them. I was there at the engagement party, he said suddenly. I didn't speak. She drank too much, he said. Don't take it to heart. I looked at him, suddenly feeling that this sentence was very familiar. Chloe had said the exact same thing. Professor Hayes, I began, do you think it was a joke? He paused. It was brief, but I caught it. The setting wasn't quite appropriate, he said. Not a denial. Just gently pushing the problem onto the environment. I nodded and didn't say anything else. After finishing my business, I stood up to leave. He walked me to the door, his tone still gentle. Young man, don't take some things too seriously. I glanced back at him. My problem before was that I didn't take things seriously enough. He froze, offering no response. Walking out of the academic building, the sunlight was perfect. I stood on the steps and suddenly realized something. Simon Hayes had never considered me someone he needed to look in the eye. In his view, I was just an obedient student, a character who could be appeased with a few light words. And Chloe was nothing more than an ornament in his field of vision. They stood on the same side, viewing me from the same angle. I felt no anger, only a clear judgment. Some shadows, if you don't face them directly, will always be behind you. And I didn't intend to be the person who turned a blind eye anymore. I cleaned up all my contacts, not blocking, but deleting. Chat histories, call logs, all wiped. I redrew the boundaries of my time outside of work. I started leaving on time, going to the gym, and reorganizing backlog project data. Life recovered quickly. So quickly that I realized the chaos of the past wasn't actually a necessity. On the third night, just as I was leaving the gym, I saw Chloe in the parking lot. She was standing by my car, wearing a thin jacket, full makeup, clearly having taken care to dress up. Seeing me, she immediately walked over, her steps faster than before. Why aren't you answering your phone? She asked, her tone lacking the self-righteousness of the previous days. I unlocked the car door, not looking at her. We have nothing to say. She reached out to block the door. Mark, you can't be like this. Her voice lowered. You have to at least give me a chance to explain. I looked up at her. This was the first time she had spoken to me with this posture. You've already explained, I said. She bit her lip, appearing to suppress her emotions. About that day, I really didn't mean it, she said. You know how everyone was egging us on. So you shouldn't be this absolute. After all these years, you're cutting it off just like that. I moved around her and sat in the driver's seat. She immediately grabbed the door, her tone finally turning urgent. What do you actually want? I pulled the door shut, rolling the window down halfway. I want peace. She was stunned. This answer was clearly not in her expectations. She was used to arguments, used to my compromises, but she wasn't used to being ignored. The next day, she came directly to my company. The receptionist sounded awkward when she called me. Mr. Evans, there's a Ms. Davis here to see you. She says it's personal. I asked the receptionist to ask her to leave. 10 minutes later, she sent a text saying I was too cruel. I didn't reply. She began to appear frequently in places I went. Restaurants, the gym, even the convenience store near my home. Each time, her tone would get a little lower. Can we just talk properly? It's unfair for you to treat me like this. You can't just not say a word. She was forcing a response, not because she couldn't bear to lose me, but because she was beginning to realize that things were spiraling out of control. A week later, she finally cornered me as I got off work. It had just rained, and she stood by the curb, her hair slightly damp, looking considerably more disheveled. I'm not in contact with Simon anymore, she said the moment she opened her mouth. I stopped walking. This was the first time she had actively brought up his name. That's your business, I said. She faltered, then chased after me. Don't you care? She asked. Didn't you used to care about these things the most? I looked at her, suddenly feeling she was a stranger. When I cared, you didn't. Her eyes rimmed red. Can't you just give me one chance? She whispered. I really know I was wrong. In that moment, I felt no satisfaction. Only an indescribable sense of irony. She wasn't suffering because she lost me. She was suffering because she discovered that the person who had always held her up had suddenly let go. Chloe, I said, what you're afraid of isn't breaking up. She looked up at me. You're afraid that there's no one left to cover for you. Her expression froze. She opened her mouth, but couldn't find words to refute it. I turned and walked away without stopping. Later, her appearances became less frequent. But I knew she hadn't let go. She was just starting to realize that this time, the positions had truly shifted. I didn't see Chloe again. Her messages stopped at a few inquiries that received no replies, quickly fading into silence. That silence wasn't an end. It was more like something else was brewing. I poured all my energy back into work. The project entered a critical phase, requiring coordination with multiple parties. Being busy kept me clear-headed and gave me time to reorganize some matters. Simon Hayes' name wasn't something I brought up actively. It came up during a project discussion meeting where someone mentioned issues with university resource coordination, incidentally noting Simon's recent situation, that his mood had been off lately and several initiatives he was supposed to lead were progressing very slowly. The person speaking was casual but hesitant. I just listened without chiming in. Cracks are rarely split open by a single blow. They start from the edges and slowly spread. A few days later, I went to the university to hand over some data and ran into a former junior classmate. He looked hesitant when he saw me, but greeted me proactively. Mark, he said, long time. We stood in the hallway for a moment. He lowered his voice, saying things in the department were a bit chaotic lately. I didn't press, but looking like he had been holding it in for a long time, he couldn't help but continue. Professor Hayes has had a few complaints filed against him recently, he said. Nobody cared before, but now suddenly everything's being dug up. I simply nodded. Nothing major, he added. Just some situations where boundaries weren't very clear. He spoke with restraint, but it was enough. These things hadn't happened suddenly. They had just been blocked from view by his status and halo before. I went back to my car and sat for a long time. I hadn't orchestrated a campaign. I had simply placed the facts I knew where they were supposed to appear. In a formal project feedback report, I had truthfully documented several issues regarding resource coordination. No commentary, no emotion. All content could be traced back to specific times and personnel. This was my standard way of doing things. The fallout began to ferment, slower than I imagined. No sensation, no sudden plot twists. Just certain conveniences that had been taken for granted began to be re-examined. Simon's schedule was compressed. Some events that originally belonged to him were reassigned. I saw him again at a public conference. He sat in the back, looking more tired than before, his speech lacking its usual ease. When it was his turn to speak, his tone was still mild, but noticeably restrained. That change didn't need pointing out. Everyone in the audience could see it. After the meeting, he wasn't surrounded by people as usual. I passed by him. He looked up at me, his eyes complex, but he didn't speak. Between us, nothing was said. Nothing needed to be said. That afternoon, Chloe came to find me. She stood downstairs in my office, eyes red, makeup failing to hide her exhaustion. Did you know about this all along? She asked the moment she saw me. I looked at her, neither denying nor admitting. Simon is in trouble, she said, her voice tight. Did you do something behind his back? I don't do things behind backs, I said. She froze. I just put things that should be in the light, into the light. The color drained from her face. How could you do that? Her voice trembled. You knew exactly what would happen if those things were brought up. I looked at her. This was the first time she wasn't standing on a moral high ground to accuse me. Did you think those things didn't exist? I asked. She fell silent. A long time later, she whispered, I didn't think it would be like this. I nodded. There are a lot of things you didn't think about. She lifted her head, and tears finally fell. What do I do now? She asked. I really don't know what to do. In that moment, I suddenly realized she was finally facing consequences. Not emotions, not grievances. Real, existing results. That's between you two, I said. It doesn't require me to clean it up. She stood there and didn't chase after me again. I walked into the building. As the elevator doors closed, the light from outside was blocked out bit by bit. Things were still unfolding. The crack had appeared. The rest was just a matter of time. Chloe disappeared for a while. Not completely gone, but she stopped appearing frequently. Occasionally a message would pop up, the tone deliberately light. No interrogation, no emotional venting, just some irrelevant concern. I didn't reply. Outside of work, I began organizing old items. Moving plans were put on the agenda. This apartment held too many things that didn't belong to the present. The night I contacted the realtor, she showed up again. Without advance notice. When the doorbell rang, I was packing books. After opening the door, she stood there holding nothing, no extra accessories on her, looking like she had rushed over. She was thinner. The concealer under her eyes couldn't hide the fatigue, and she seemed timid. Can I come in? She asked. Her voice was very low. I stepped aside. She walked in, her gaze sweeping over the living room. When she saw the cardboard boxes stacked on the floor, her steps faltered. You moving? She asked. Yes, I said. She was silent for a moment before continuing inside. I thought you just wanted to cool off. I taped the box shut, not responding. She stood by the window, looking at the night outside, her fingers twisting together unconsciously. I've been thinking a lot lately, she said. I admit I was wrong about the past. If she had said this a few months ago, I might have stopped to listen. Now it just felt too late. You weren't unaware of where the problem was, I said. She turned around, eyes reddening. I know. She nodded. It's just that back then, I thought you would always be there. Saying this out loud, she seemed to startle herself. She finally realized she had let the truth slip. So you regret it now? I asked. She didn't answer immediately. After a while, she walked closer to me, her voice trembling. I did not choose you, she said. I just didn't distinguish the positions clearly. I looked at her. She was still used to parsing responsibility, speaking vaguely, as if everything were just an error in judgment. Chloe, I said, you distinguished very clearly. She looked up. You knew which person made you feel prestigious, and which person would cover for you. I continued. You just don't want to admit that you made a choice. Her breathing became erratic. I didn't want to hurt you, she rushed to explain. Hurt was never the goal, I said. It was the result. She stood there, appearing drained of strength. I was actually waiting for you, she whispered. Waiting for you to digest all this like you used to. This sentence made the room go completely quiet. So she really thought I would bow my head, thought that as long as she stalled for time, I would retract all my dissatisfaction. You waited for the wrong thing, I said. She looked at me, tears falling. Then what were we for all those years? She asked. I didn't dodge her gaze. We were me not stopping sooner. She bit her lip, shoulders shaking slightly. Don't you have any soft spot left? She asked. I didn't answer immediately. It wasn't that I wasn't soft-hearted. It was that I had overdrawn it all. When I was soft-hearted, you didn't cherish it, I said. Bringing it up now? There's no place for it. She slowly crouched down, covering her face, crying with suppressed sobs. I didn't go to help her up. Some emotions she needed to bear herself. After a long time, she stood up. Her face was clear of tears, leaving only a blankness. I understand, she said. I nodded. She walked to the door, paused, then looked back at me. If one day I really change, she asked. That's your life, I said. It has nothing to do with me. The door closed without a sound. The room was left with only the slight friction of cardboard boxes. I continued organizing, not stopping. Some relationships aren't extended by regret. They simply reached their end long ago. Simon Hayes began to fade from my life, not suddenly vanishing, but being slowly skirted around by those around him in a very obvious way. I first felt the change viscerally at a joint meeting. The conference room was full. Usually, Simon's seat was near the front, central to the line of sight, and he spoke early. That day he wasn't late, but he was arranged in the side rear. No one explained. When he sat down, his movements were light, as if deliberately trying not to attract attention. The meeting facilitator proceeded according to the agenda. When mentioning several parts that needed coordination, his gaze paused on Simon for a split second, then quickly moved away and called someone else's name. Simon's hands rested on the table, fingertips slightly curled. When it was his turn to speak, it was already near the end. He spoke with the same tone, clear logic, cautious wording, but lacked that natural sense of being trusted he used to command. Someone looked down at data. Someone else organized files. No one interrupted, but no one chimed in either. The air was quiet. This quiet was more glaring than an argument. After the meeting, the crowd dispersed quickly. In the past, people would always stop to ask him questions. This time, there were none. He packed his documents, moving slower than before. I passed by him, and he looked up at me. That glance was no longer condescending, held no judgment. It was like he was confirming something, or perhaps measuring something. We didn't greet each other. This was the first time the distance between us became so real. For a while after that, similar situations increased. Some affairs that defaulted to his responsibility were temporarily adjusted. Not openly removed, but added audits, added processes, added layers of confirmation. These things always existed. They had just bypassed him before. Now they couldn't be bypassed. I occasionally heard others mention his name, the tone no longer singular respect, but laced with hesitation and reservation. It seems inconvenient on his end lately. Better to swap someone else in for this, saves trouble. No one spoke too directly, but everyone was making a choice. I didn't participate in any discussions. I just methodically completed my own work, submitted the materials that needed submitting, and clarified the situations that needed clarifying. In this environment, the cleaner you are, the more you stand out. Once I was stopped by him in the hallway. "Mark," he called. His voice wasn't loud, but it was definite. I stopped and turned to look at him. He looked more haggard than before. His suit still fit, but he lacked that layer of composure. There were fine lines at the corners of his eyes, looking like they had been pressed in over a short period. "Do you have time for a few words?" he asked. I checked the time and nodded. We went to the coffee area downstairs. He ordered a black coffee, no sugar. He used to remind students to drink less of this kind. Now he held it himself. "You should have heard about recent events," he said. I didn't deny it. "Some situations have been exaggerated," he continued. "Actually, it's not serious." He spoke slowly, weighing his words. "What do you think?" I asked. He looked at me, silent for a few seconds. "You've always been rational. Some things," he said, "if not deliberately focused on, will pass very quickly." I understood his meaning. "They're focused on because they exist," I said. His expression stiffened slightly. "You didn't used to talk like this," he said. "Before I was standing down below," I replied. When these words came out, his face changed completely. He stared at me, his eyes devoid of concealment for the first time. "Do you think this benefits you?" he asked. Not a threat, more like a habitual application of pressure. "Right and wrong aren't about benefits," I said. He leaned back in his chair, exhaling a long breath. "Chloe came to see me," he said. I didn't respond. "She's in a very passive position now." He looked at me. "Do you really not intend to step in?" This sentence confirmed one thing for me. In his eyes, Chloe remained a responsibility that could be transferred. "That is between you two," I said. He didn't say anything more. The coffee cooled quickly. When we stood up to leave, his posture was lower than when he arrived. After that day, I never met him alone again. Occasionally, bumping into him in public, he would avoid eye contact, as if unwilling to lock gazes. The halo that once surrounded him wasn't stolen by anyone. It was just that no one was holding it up for him anymore. And I knew very well what that meant. The day I moved, the weather was ordinary. No wind, no rain. The sky was an off-white, like a piece of paper used repeatedly. I loaded the last box into the car and stood downstairs, taking one look at the apartment I had lived in for several years. The curtains were drawn. I couldn't tell if anyone was inside. The realtor had already collected the keys. This place had nothing to do with me anymore. As the car drove out of the complex, I didn't look back. The new city wasn't far, 2 hours by Amtrak. The train car was quiet. Most people were looking down at their phones or closing their eyes to nap. I leaned against the window, watching the scenery retreat backward. The events of this period didn't replay on a loop in my mind. They were like files that had been archived, each resting in its proper place. No need to recall them repeatedly, and they wouldn't jump out suddenly. My first task in a new city was viewing apartments. I found one not too big, a one-bedroom with great light. Outside the window, I could see a river, not wide, but the water was clear. The landlord was a man of few words. He only asked me one thing when signing the lease. "Planning to stay long?" At least a few years, I said. He nodded and didn't ask more. The pace at the new company was faster than before. More projects, a mix of people, but clear rules. Responsibility lay where it belonged. No gray areas. I adapted quickly. Outside of work, I began to restructure my life. Running regularly, cooking for myself on weekends, partitioning time into blocks. No one appeared suddenly. No one interrupted. One night, buying things at a convenience store, the cashier gave me a second look, saying I looked familiar. I thought about it and shook my head. Probably a mistake, I said. She smiled and didn't say anything else. In that moment, I realized I was thoroughly exiting the coordinates of that old life. Not deliberately disappearing, just no longer being marked by anyone. A few weeks later, I received a call from an unknown number. When I picked up, it was Chloe's voice. Her tone was light, sounding as if coming from a great distance. I heard you changed cities, she said. Yeah. Are you used to the new place? It's fine. There was silence on the other end for a moment. Simon left the university, she said. I didn't respond. I wasn't surprised by this. He's not doing very well right now, she added. I still didn't answer. I'm not trying to say anything on his behalf, her voice lowered. Just wanted to let you know. Understood, I said. She seemed to want to say something else, but stopped. Are you living well? She asked. This was a question she never used to ask. Normal life? I said. She gave a soft acknowledgement. That's good. After the call ended, I stood there, not moving immediately. The lights in the convenience store were bright, bleaching the floor white. I suddenly discovered I didn't feel any fluctuation. No satisfaction, no regret. It was like hearing an old piece of news unrelated to myself. Later, one day, I was running by the river and saw someone fishing on a bank. The water's surface was pulled into a thin ripple, then quickly returned to calm. I stopped to drink water and watch for a while. Some traces simply shouldn't remain for too long. Returning home, I opened the window. The wind blew in, carrying a hint of moisture. New project documents lay on the table. I opened the first page and began to make notes. Life continues forward, needing no ceremony. That engagement party, those laughs, that awkwardness and choice pushed to the stage, they had all receded to a place far away. I hadn't won against anyone, nor did I intend to prove anything. I had simply finally stood on my own side and walked on. Story complete.